Hello and welcome to Seed Speaks. I'm so excited for you all to join us today. We're going to be talking about recruiting for diversity in agriculture. My name is Sonja Begemann. I'm the editorial director at Seed World Group. I'm excited today because I'm joined by a panel of experts who are going to provide us with all sorts of expertise. First, we have Mark Waschek. He is an executive recruiter at Ag1 Source. We have Risa Demasi. She is the co-founder of Grassland Oregon Seed. I have Emily Ellis. She is a recruiter at BASF. And I have Dr. Anna Alicea, who is a tech services program manager at BASF. Thank you guys all for joining me today. We really appreciate it. I'm actually going to skip over the elevator speech. Tell me about yourself, because I think this is one topic that we're going to just want to spend a lot of time talking about. But first, let's set the stage, Mark. You know, we're going to talk a lot about recruiting and the importance of having diversity in the workforce so that, you know, we have lots of different viewpoints. But let's talk first about, you know, what is the stage right now for recruiting in agriculture? What is the talent acquisition landscape right now?
Well, I think the easy answer for that, as anybody who's doing any hiring right now knows, it's incredibly challenging just to find people, period, right? And so then that issue complicates when you consider that we, especially in agriculture, in the ag industry and the seed industry in particular, we're an aging workforce. We have about 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 years old a day in this country. The economy is good, the opportunity to retire is there, and they're taking advantage of that. In some cases, people are retiring a little earlier than planned just because they have the opportunity to do so. So that is one problem. The other dynamic is that with most of the organizations in the seed industry being fairly rural in their base and needing talent in rural markets, the pandemic actually threw a wrench in the recruiting process because we all learned how we can be effective working from home. And we enjoy the opportunity to be with our families, and we've all reconsidered the work-life balance, the quality of life, and the desire to relocate your family for a career isn't as strong as it once was, because we now found ways like this meeting right here where we're all in different seats across the country having a conversation. And that works for some roles in the seed industry, but there's still a lot of roles where you need people to be based in those rural communities, and that's just adding a major challenge to the recruitment process overall.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Dr. Alicea, I know that you work a lot with those just coming out of college, and that's how you're helping BASF to connect with those individuals. What is the biggest challenge that you see with that age group of getting people from more, you know, diverse and you know, a richer variety of backgrounds to come into agriculture? What is that barrier for them?
So one of the things that our team was challenged with last year was recruiting in a virtual environment. Just recruitment in general is certainly about relationships with students. It's about relationships with some of those external stakeholders and organizations as well. Our team really struggled last year in this virtual environment, just making connections with students. One of the things that we could be better at BASF is just utilizing our technologies and social media a lot better to reach this age group. One of the really interesting things that I love about this generation is that they are super creative and probably the most agile generation that I've had the opportunity to work with in the market. They are also very submerged in agriculture, all things agriculture, right? So we find students that are very, you know, well tapped into social media platforms, well tapped into those university level cooperative extensions, and then also some of those corporate connections as well. And so I think, you know, moving forward, if things continue to kind of stay in this virtual realm, we'll need to do a better job at connecting with kind of those affiliations that kind of cater to minorities, right? So specifically, taking a look at ethnic minority, right? So traditionally, our organization works with AFA and then FFA as well. There's a collegiate kind of category for that as well. And so our team also works very closely with Manners. And so it's the minorities in agriculture focus group. And so we've been able to build and establish some of those relationships over time to help us bring in more diverse talent as well. And then lastly, one of the cool things that kind of came out of COVID that we were also kind of excited about was in this virtual realm, we are a very small team of individuals, but we were certainly able to branch out to more universities across the US. Whereas previously we'd have to physically fly, stay in a hotel for a few days, interact with students. Kind of in this virtual realm, we've had the opportunity to reach out to more, to meet more students in this virtual realm. And kind of my hope is that over time we'll continue to breed and nurture those relationships to help us in this diversity realm.
Excellent advice. Relationships are such a critical part of the agriculture world in general, but recruiting talent is certainly no exception. So really good advice. Now, Risa, I'm really curious to hear your perspective because I've been in the ag industry for about 7 years now, and I can tell you that when I go to large meetings, most of the time, we're in a weird situation right now. Mark is way outnumbered by women. Most of the time, it's myself and maybe 2 other women in the room, and we're surrounded by a whole bunch of men. And so, I'm used to being outnumbered, and that's kind of become the norm for me. But Risa, you've been around a little bit longer than I have, and I'm curious to kind of hear your perspective. And when you first started in agriculture, what was the environment like for you? And then how has it changed today? Is it better? And then what's the room we have for improvement?
Yeah, no, that's a great perspective. Yeah, when I started, and it was a lot longer than 7 years ago, but in my sector anyways, the first meeting I went to, you could count the women that were there for the meeting, not including spouses, but there for the meeting on one hand, and we certainly were outnumbered, but that has changed, and I think dramatically so. And it's I think in a really wonderful way, because as more women have entered the industry, they're making space for more women and for other types of diversity. And, that's really a wonderful thing. I remember meeting with Krista Harden when she was serving as Deputy Secretary under Tom Vilsack. And I happened to be serving as the first woman chair for the American Seed Trade Association. And one of the first things she told me, she says, "You are first, but you are certainly not last. And you need to understand your responsibility for making, for those coming behind you." And at the time I thought, oh man, that's a lot of weight to carry on my shoulders. But she, that's stuck with me. And I've seen women do it for all types of diversity, not just for other women. And I think it's, like I said, I just think it's a wonderful thing. And, it's not that we want to be called out and be separate. We just want to be there and have a fair shot to be able to bring the contributions and value that, and everybody wants to be relevant. We want to be there to be contributing and to be at the table.
100%, I agree. Now, Emily, to kind of look at, recruiting for women, recruiting for minorities, recruiting to, bring in lots of different talent, as one of the lead talent recruiters there for BASF, what are some of the strategies that you've employed to help attract this talent? Because, if everyone's seeking out diverse talent, that means these people are obviously in high demand. So how do you attract this talent? How do you find this talent?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of education happening within the workplace, educating our team members, our hiring managers to better understand what some of these challenges are and some of the perspectives that our candidates are bringing to the table that, we are historically trying to attract populations of diverse candidates to rural areas that might not have the needs and accommodations of our diverse candidates that they need for their day-to-day lives. And, I think there's education that comes with that and conversations with our hiring managers and our leadership about what is the future of work and how can we attract these populations to our organization and overcome some of these challenges. And I think, honestly, COVID has done a lot for us in terms of changing our perspectives and opening platforms for these conversations to take place and starting to talk about how can we become a more remote or global workforce and combine these perspectives in a different way. So I think these conversations are starting to take place, and we might not have all of the answers yet, but at least the conversations have been opened up. So I think the education is coming. We're seeing that more and more take place within the employers of educating the teams on diversity and the challenges that we're seeing.
Absolutely. And Mark, I think, we're doing a lot of talking about, recruiting more diverse candidates and having a more diverse workforce. I think maybe I've missed the elephant in the room here. Mark, talk to us about why it's so important to have a diverse workforce. I mean, the answer might seem obvious, but let's go ahead and spell it out. Why does it matter? And why is it so important to have diversity in our workforce?
That's actually a really good question, because I think a lot of us who are part of the recruiting industry and just industry in general kind of lose sight of what the real reason we're doing this for. It's not as much diversity for diversity's sake. Unfortunately, company policies and industry policies and government policies tend to shadow our view of diversity, and this is something we have to do because we have to do it. What I think people lose sight of is that diversity is actually very empowering to an organization, because diversity, regardless of gender, race, creed, all the things that we can label as diversity, what we're enabling by having a diverse company culture is actually diversity in thought, diversity in action, collaboration from different viewpoints and different backgrounds is empowering to an organization. And we all lose sight of that because we're so wrapped up in who you are or where you came from or what you do. I even challenge organizations that I work with on this, in that they bring up the diversity word, and I say, throw that concept out, but let's just focus on diversity of just backgrounds in general, regardless of what we're labeling as diverse. If you think about the seed industry, there was one point in time where there was probably lots of forage seed companies that only hired people with forage seed background, and some crazy company got the idea to hire an animal nutritionist. And that's a totally different diverse background. We want seed people. We want crop production people. We don't want dairy people. But guess what? I mean, now every seed company that sells forage has dairy experts on their staff because of the animal nutrition benefits. So that's just one example, but it's not just, again, I go back to, we get so wrapped up in diversity being about what we can see. But to me, diversity is more about what we know. And organizations need to first be open to hiring people with different thoughts and different ideas, as opposed to what's listed on a sheet of paper as being diverse.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that from a company perspective, absolutely. Because if you are only getting one demographic, let's call it, you have one thought process, you start drinking your own Kool-Aid, and you just start, you believe what everybody is telling you, which is the same thing over and over again. So a lack of ideas, leads to vulnerability as a company. And when you get that diversity of creative ideas and minds and ways of thinking about things completely outside of what you ever conceived of, brings resilience and strength, just as you said.
And as you said earlier, the diversity enables diversity, right? As more women get into agriculture, it creates the opportunities for more women, the same thing for all levels of diversity. Plus, you can flip that over, and the more diverse an organization is in who they hire and their thought process, the more they are attractive to diverse customer base as well, from your product line perspective.
Yeah, and I think you want to look for people that have different ideas than you do. Maybe challenge you, because we all need to be challenged. Again, it goes back to drinking your own Kool-Aid. If you're just thinking about things one way, you're limiting yourself. And I think the vulnerability that comes with that is a dangerous place to be today.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really good perspective. I hadn't considered the vulnerability of, drinking our own Kool-Aid, but ag is certainly not immune to doing that. Whenever we have some conversations, we talk about preaching to the choir about things like GMOs, but you can do the same thing internally too. So really good points. We've had a question come in from our audience, and Emily, I think you're going to be the one to answer this. I could be wrong, but I think you're going to be good at this one.
Oh,
go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I saw that question come in, and I think tying in with the response to the last question, I think it's important to note that the demographics of the world are changing. The world is becoming more diverse, and what we're doing to educate people who don't come from the ag world on what we do in the business and how they can be a part of it is very critical. And I think that's the key when we're looking at connecting with certain demographics. There's maybe a lack of education on what the ag world is and what they can do within the ag world. And I think those unique perspectives and insights are very important. To Mark's point, we need that innovation and that new perspective in this industry. We need new insights. We're constantly innovating and bringing new technology, and that's coming from differing perspectives. So I think there's certainly perhaps some fear, as it came in, mentioned in the audience question, fear of the unknown, or maybe even not even knowing what they don't know. I think a lot of young people don't even realize what can be accomplished in the ag space and how they can do that. There's a lot of preconceived notions and stereotypes about what agriculture is, and that it's, old white men on fields that are doing the farming. But it's so much more than that. And we're bringing so much more technology into the space. It's really diversifying as an industry. And so we need to help educate people on what the industry offers and how they can contribute.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Alicea, we had another question come in, and it actually ties into a personal experience I've had. When I first graduated from college, my first job was in seed sales, and I was moved to a town of 300 people in the middle of nowhere in Iowa. I knew no one. I was 5.5 hours away from my then fiance. It was awful. The experience with the job was great, but being alone was really unpleasant for me. And so, are you hearing about that resistance at the college level? And we're talking here about hiring for diversity, and that's part of the conversation. But in general, too, is the fact that ag is so rural, is that a turnoff for a lot of these candidates?
I'm so glad that you tapped me for this question, because as I'm reading it, I kind of flipped the question in my brain from a hiring manager perspective, right? So am I resistant to hiring diverse candidates just based on their preference for either living in a rural area or not living in a rural area, right? I'd say at a high level, I'm not resistant, right? I feel like as a hiring manager and also as a brand ambassador for BASF, it is my responsibility not only to bring in diverse individuals for jobs. So I know we're talking diversity of thought, but I'd like to go several layers deeper and maybe touch on gender diversity and also ethnic diversity as well. If I know there's an ethnic diverse individual that has a keen, liking to BASF, I feel it's my duty to ensure that their assignment for the summer, so thinking about our interns that are kind of scattered across the US, it's my responsibility to ensure that they have an awesome experience during the summer. It's my loyalty to also ensure that whatever part of the US that they're in, they're able to get a haircut, right? People kind of take full advantage of that, right? You never think, oh my God, everyone doesn't know how to do my hair, right? There's some places in the US where I'm 100% certain if I go in for a haircut, they're probably not gonna know exactly what to do, right? Products, right? Hair products. If, there are also some remote locations in the US where ethnic diverse individuals also can't find hair products, right? So all things alike, I'm certainly taking all of that into consideration. I'm also taking in consideration, will this person have an awesome summer with BASF? Will they go back and then tell a friend who will then tell a friend who will then tell a friend that says, hey, BASF, we still have, bounds and strides of things to do to enhance diversity, but at least they have a diverse manager in that role that absolutely gets it. And I am going to set everyone up for success, and I will absolutely ensure that they have an awesome summer with us at BASF. So I'm glad, long story short, that you had me tackle that question. I certainly feel passionate about making sure that I'm educated and I have the expertise to understand that everyone can't necessarily fit in every, single space. there has to be a little bit of strategy involved with that process as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of responsibility on the manager's shoulders, and that's a good point for everyone and for all of us who are hiring, just to think about, let's not fit them where it is best for me, but let's consider the needs of the candidate too. And I think a lot of places are trying to do that, but a good reminder of, what are the needs of the candidate? How can we create a positive experience that makes them want to come back and makes them want to stay with us? Really good, really good. All right, Risa, I'm curious here. So we've tackled the collegiate age group question. And I'm really curious because diversity is, it's ethnic backgrounds, it's gender, but it's also age diversity. And Risa, you've hired college students, you've hired people who I would call in the sunset of their career, where they're 10 or so years from retirement. I'm curious, what are the benefits? What are the pros and cons of hiring someone who might leave you in 5 years because they get to retire and hang out with the grandkids, but they bring these, 40, 50 years of experience? What can you tell me about those pros and cons?
Great questions. But I think when you talk about leaving in 4 or 5 years or whatever, that's not unique to somebody maybe a little long in the tooth in their career. I think the younger generations, when I started out, you wanted a forever home in a company, right? You just assumed, and that's been my path. Had it not been for some mergers and acquisitions, I would still be at the first company probably that I started at. Where today, I think it's expected that you'll be changing roles or companies pretty regularly. So I don't think it's unique to age, but yeah, there are some really great things you get with somebody just coming out of college. They're fresh, they're idealistic, they've got so much passion, and they're ready to you just wind them up and kind of just give them a little guidance and let them go, because they're going to take you places you never thought you could go. Same thing with somebody who's older in their career. They're a little bit more settled. Things don't rattle them or shake them quite as easily as somebody who's newer in their role. I'm finding that more as I'm getting older. Things, the world's going to be the world. Whatever comes at you is going to be whatever it is, and you'll get through it. So I think there are advantages with both.
Absolutely. All right, well, I see that we're getting close on time, but I had one question that I did want each of you to be able to answer. And that is, from all of your perspectives, maybe tell me one improvement that you've seen your time in agriculture in terms of our industry encouraging a more diverse workforce. And then tell me one thing that you'd like to see improve. So we'll start with Mark.
I would say the one thing that organizations could take to improve diversity is recognize that it's a marathon, not a sprint, in that it's a process that you have to, from your employer brand, you have to do it every day, all the time, not just when you're hiring, wake up and say, hey, we should hire this one diverse, right? It doesn't work that way, right? And I think that to me is the biggest problem inherent to most organizations, is they think it's something they have to do that's job specific versus culturally, right? And what I'd like to see improve is kind of back to what Risa and I were talking about earlier, is that it's not necessarily about gender, race, creed. Your start is that skill set. And once you open your mind to what people could do in the future, it eliminates any need for you to think about diversity in terms of any of those things. And you start hiring the right people, regardless of where they came from or where they've been. And you think about what they can do in your organization.
Mm-hmm. Emily, what is, the biggest improvement that you've seen, and where do you want to see improvement?
Well, I think we've obviously seen great strides in females making progress within the ag world. We've seen women make up now 36% of farmers in the U.S., and I think that's huge. But I think we have much greater work to do on the ethnic diversity side. And I think, to Mark's point, talking about looking at those transferable skills and how we can incorporate those and get hiring managers to think differently and look at those skills differently. So it's about that willingness to hire, mentor, train, and retain that diverse talent. And whether that's diversity in industry or ethnic diversity, I think there's a lot of work that we have left to do there, even though we have made great strides in opening it up in terms of gender diversity.
Sounds good. Dr. Alicea, it looks like we have one question that came in from the audience. So I'm going to ask you because I think you'll be able to answer it. So the question we got is, I heard a cool quote, diversity is the mix, inclusion is making the mix work. What do you think about that?
I agree, right? So this ties in very well to your last question as well, right? So I echo the same sentiments from Emily, right? We've made leaps and bounds. You know, I am also an anomaly in the ag industry. I have the great opportunity to stand on, you know, several giants that came before me in the ag industry as well. So when I kind of look at this quote, right? I think organizations, they know this idea of numbers management, right? They know who to recruit, who to bring into the organization. So the data is, you know, very cohesive. The data usually makes sense. I think what's often not measured is this idea of inclusion, right? When I think about inclusion, I think about engagement. Inclusion, I also think about representation, right? So you have women, you have ethnic minorities. Where are they in the organization, right? Are they admins? Are they, you know, making coffee, cleaning, right? Or are they in roles where they're empowered to make hiring decisions? Are they in roles where they're also empowered to make business relevant decisions so that they can bring about change, and they're not sort of in these, you know, dead end roles that may or may not make an impact to the organization. So yeah, that's, you know, tying in the question before to also this quote. I think, you know, how can we make things more inclusive? I think it's about representation and ensuring you have equal mix of individuals at all levels across the organization.
Really, really good thoughts there. I appreciate that. And Risa, you know, what's the one big improvement that you're proud the industry has made, and what's the improvement that you want to see us make?
Well, Dr. Alicea mentioned something earlier, and I think she was spot on about, and she didn't say it quite like I heard it in the way I've been thinking about things, is encouragement. I mean, what an encouragement you are to those interns working for you. You know, the fact that you're thinking about things so many different ways as opposed to just the role that they're filling. And I think we underestimate a lot of times the power of encouragement, just an encouraging word. I mean, I can tell you people in my life and exactly where I was sitting, the situation I was in, when they made a comment to me that encouraged me and just believed in me to be able to do whatever I wanted to do, or whatever they saw the potential. And I think that has a ripple effect. So if you have that, if you affect 3 people and they affect 3 people, and I think that's what we've seen in the industry. I think we're continuing to see that happen on many different levels. What can we do more? Maybe just more of that. You know, I've heard companies that are definitely being intentional about things. And again, as you know, Mark was saying, it's not just stats. We're not just trying to fill stats so that the company looks good. It's really getting people to the table and letting them engage and be part of a company, part of an impact, you know, a global impact that we can have. I don't know anywhere else other than ag where you can have a global impact if you're just given the chance.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Well, I've found this entire conversation very encouraging, and I appreciate each of your time. Your insights were invaluable and just so appreciated. I think this is a topic that you guys can expect an article from me on, because I think we can talk about this a whole lot more. There might be some opportunity for a follow-up video, maybe something on demand in our Seed Speaks channel on YouTube. I will talk to each of these experts to see if I can convince them to come back and talk to me again, because like I said, this has been so encouraging and so great to hear from all of you. So thank you to each of you. And thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in today. Be sure to tune in next week as Alex Martin hosts Seed Speaks again, and she will be talking about, you know, we recruit people, we do a good job of recruiting people, but hiring is more than just offering someone a salary. It's offering them some benefits, and there's tangible benefits, and there's also benefits of what's the environment, things like that. So she's going to talk through some of those benefits and what we can do to make a really encouraging workplace and encourage people to stay with us for the long term. So thank you all again. Be sure to tune in next week, and we'll get this posted on YouTube for you all. Thank you.